campaign for a number of years called Big Brother Incorporated. And the focus of that campaign is to get what's called export controls on surveillance technologies. So export controls are licenses that a private company will have to approach a government to receive to be allowed to export a particular technology. Now, since 2011, this particular category of technology, an IMSI catcher, is controlled. And beginning this year, the UK government has become more transparent in reporting on who's requesting what licenses for what kinds of technology. And so at the beginning of this quarter, we saw that some company, we're not sure what, although we can still go and ask the UK government, a company had requested a license and received authorization to export this category of technology to Indonesia. So in some kind of capacity, we don't know if it was to the police or to the military or to intelligence or to KPK, but it would appear as though this sort of technology has been purchased in some capacity by Indonesia, by somebody, and so it could be in operation. And now one of the things that has to be asked is, those 12 laws that have 2 government regulations and do any of those laws adequately address this kind of capability? Do we just think that this is simply just the same as all communication surveillance, like it's the same as all kind of wiretapping? Or is there something distinctly different about the way that this operates that would mean a different power would have to be requested? In the US, they definitely think so. They've had to create a whole new act just in Washington state to allow for these things, they call them stingrays in the US, to be operated. Because they're not just connecting to Benji's phone. They're not just looking for yours. But because they operate on an area-wide basis, they'll be picking up every single other person. It's like collateral damage. And so the US have decided that that is a distinct difference to every other wiretapping capability that is available to law enforcement. And so it has to be regulated separately. And so maybe if you guys wanted to pursue it, that this is, again, something that you should be raising to say, look, we understand that this technology may be in Indonesia and it may be in use. We don't know under what laws you might be using it. And neither do we think that any of the laws that you could be using it under are suitable for this kind of technology. And finally, we're going to get to the really fun stuff, which is intrusion technologies. And when I say fun, I mean terrifying. I definitely mean terrifying. So what we've been talking about mostly has been the surveillance of networks, right? So the surveillance of mobile phone network, trying to capture information, the surveillance of whole international gateways, which are just, again, bigger networks. But the growing area, both in terms of the private surveillance industry and what they're selling, and in terms of the kind of capabilities that governments want to have, rests in targeting devices. So no longer about the network, now it's all about the device. And they want to be able to get to an individual's device. They want to be able to see what that individual is communicating. They want to maybe even be able to see their contacts, any documents they may be producing as well. And for that, they use intrusion technologies, or Trojans, as they call, or malware. There is like a whole bunch of names for them. I think at one point we're going to have to decide on one name and one name only, but right now we'll just work with the 4 or 5 that's operating. So malware, normally we kind of think of it as like a kid in the room generating this kind of like a little piece of information, that, a code that gathers people's passwords or banking details, and is like really bad, of course, fraud and like electronic crime. But intrusion technologies become so sophisticated that states want to start to use them. And they want to use them for, like I was saying, pretty much getting access to a whole person's device. So this will mean, in the case of something like a computer, the kind of technology that this company selling, FinFisher, and the FinSpy kit, if it's installed on your device, it'll access your documents, all of your contacts, all of your emails. It'll have access to all of your passwords because it logs every key that you type, every Skype address book that you have, every Skype conversation that you have. And then if your activity on your device isn't enough, they can also switch on the webcam remotely or switch on the microphone remotely as well. This is a piece of technology that turns your device into a state's own personal spy. And you're charging the spy, you're giving the spy your information willingly. It's a real trick, a confidence trick that creates a lot of disturbance when people begin to think about it. And to really, really generate more concern, the way that the technology is installed on a person's device is all about tricking a person's sense of comfort in using the internet. So sometimes they'll generate it looking like an update for Adobe or an iTunes update or any kind of other update that we have to do every single day. It'll appear just like that. You need to install an update. You click that, and your click will execute what's called a vulnerability. And that vulnerability will effectively provide a channel between the FinSpy master, so the kind of master server, and the device, and shoot straight down into your device. It's as simple as that. We worked with Moroccan activists who'd experienced this when they were previously in a group of investigative journalists. And what happened to them was they had an anonymous tip-off line, and one day they all got an email from an individual saying, please don't let this get back to me. I don't want to be involved. This is incredibly sensitive. And there was a PDF attached, just a basic document. And some of them clicked on it, and it was just a blank PDF. There was nothing there. But what was actually taking place was another vulnerability was being executed. So just a basic PDF attached to an email was able to open up a connection between the device and the server and install the malware. But that's not to say that you shouldn't open attachments whenever you receive them. You just got to be able to begin to trust and corroborate who's communicating with you, why they're communicating with you, that kind of stuff. So in the Indonesian story, Indonesian government has done deals with this particular company, or an aspect of this company, Gamma TSE. I, for a long time, only thought that it was about surveillance vans, because that's what Gamma TSE focused on. But actually, it would appear as though there is some kind of wiretapping equipment that was provided based on documents that WUD was sharing. So it may be that exactly this kind of technology is in operation in Indonesia. And again, are there any laws in Indonesia that effectively deal with this kind of capability? Like, it's so intrusive. Again, it goes from our perspective at PI, it goes way beyond a wiretap on a phone, because it's control of a device. It's not just information that's traveling from it. It's information that rests on the device. It's even vulnerabilities to achieve it as well. So to do this, what comes with it, of course, is you have to be able to find vulnerabilities in a system and then withhold them from the provider. Normally, if you discover a vulnerability in the kind of hacker community, there's big debates about, do you disclose, do you sell on? And with the growing use of this kind of technology, that discussion about what do you do with the vulnerability is going to be incredibly important as a policy discussion, because you're going to have states now more interested than ever in providing these vulnerabilities. Not to say that they weren't before. Of course, like the US or Israel or whoever it was that melted the Iranian nuclear centrifuges, that was a piece of malware using a vulnerability as well. So it's happened in the past. And the other problem, of course, is a lot of people say these days, like, if you use encryption and you encrypt your communication, you don't have anything to worry about. You're taking the step. You're going to make it more expensive for your government to intercept your information and decrypt it, so they're probably not going to bother if you're of like a low-level threat. But if they have this kind of technology, encryption doesn't matter, because they're behind the encryption almost, is the phrase. So even before you encrypt any communication and it leaves your device, as you're typing it, and intrusion software is able to, of course, log exactly what that message is saying. So it defeats that kind of purpose. To kind of summarize, the last 4 years, so that involves like the Snowden revelations, and from my personal perspective, being able to understand a bit more the private surveillance industry, the last 4 years have pushed things forward hugely in our understanding of what is available to states and what is interesting to states in terms of capabilities. So we've got a fantastic level of understanding about what's really out there and what are we talking about when we talk about communication surveillance technologies. The goal now has to become how we trigger a modern debate around the use of these technologies and their effect on our fundamental rights. And with that, what it needs is a better understanding of the use of these technologies to understand how effective our laws are. But then in hand, also understanding the laws to better understand how they can effectively regulate the use of communication surveillance technologies. So everything goes hand in hand. And as I was saying, every time we introduce a technology, we have to immediately think, well, is there a law that's suitable for the regulation of that technology? Is there something that is thinking about how you might be able to regulate and make sure that this operates in a limited manner, one with effective oversight? And so that's the super interesting bit, and why LSAM's